Alright, let's be honest about Alita Battle Angel. And this review will not contain any spoilers at all, so you guys should be good to go. First impressions. So when I first saw the trailers for this movie, I was mildly interested. I wasn't originally going to see this movie in theaters, but my friends made me do it for our podcast. And for those of you guys that don't know, I actually have a weekly podcast on YouTube, Spotify, and iTunes where we discuss movie, TV show, and video game news, and we also debate and have discussions around those topics, and we also have like a movie of the week that we watch together and talk about as well. Our movie of the week is usually something on Netflix or Hulu, but this time we agreed to see Alita Battle Angel. So yeah, go follow my podcast on Spotify or iTunes or wherever, or you can just listen to it here on YouTube, and there are new episodes every Monday at noon Eastern Time. But like I said, I wasn't particularly hyped when I saw the trailers, but I was still kind of interested. I honestly went into this movie with pretty low expectations, and based on the trailers, it looked like it was going to be a cheesy action movie. However, I will say this movie is genuinely much better than I thought it would be. It didn't blow me away per se, like it wasn't a masterpiece, but it wasn't bad at all. Story. Overall, the story in this movie was pretty solid. It had my attention. Unlike Aquaman, which is another recently released CGI action film that a couple of you may have heard of, I actually liked the story. It's simple and intriguing. To sum it up quickly, Dr. Ito is a doctor for cyborgs, and he's searching through a scrapyard in Iron City and comes across the remains of a cyborg with an intact human brain. He brings her to life, calls her Alita, and basically shows her around the world in the city. And because she doesn't remember much, it's an interesting way to introduce the viewers to the world and the other characters and the history, etc. in a very organic way. So Alita is basically being educated about Iron City and the universe of the movie, as are we. And as the movie progresses, she slowly remembers her past and becomes a badass warrior. And that's pretty much the simplified version. But during this movie, I wasn't bored at all. I thought it was pretty damn interesting. I did think some parts were pretty predictable. I'm not going to dive into spoilers. If you want to know more of what I'm talking about, then you can leave a comment and I'll talk to you about it. But without giving anything away, I thought what they did with Hugo was kind of predictable. Not the thing about his profession in the movie, but kind of towards the end when Dr. Ito helps him out, let's just say that. But yeah, there were a few predictable plot points, and some parts of the movie were kind of cheesy. In particular, the dialogue during the romance scenes and the fight scenes were pretty corny. There were cheesy video game lines from the bad guys and, "We belong together" type of lines during the romance scenes. You know, you get the point. Cheesy lines like that. But as a whole, the story was very interesting. And by the end of the movie, there was still more I wanted to learn about that universe. Characters. The characters were kind of meh, except for a few. The three most likable characters in the movie were easily Dr. Ito, Hugo, and of course, Alita. Seriously though, Alita carried this film. She was definitely the most interesting part of the movie. Not to mention, she's adorable and lovable. Alita has this sweet innocence to her because she's basically been reborn by Dr. Ito, and she's learning about this world, and she's super naive, and I just think it's a lot of fun. And whether it's seeing her eat an orange for the first time or learning to play motorball, Alita is just a super fun, adorable, heartwarming character. And as the movie continues, she finds out she's basically a badass warrior, and she embraces that side. And it's just really cool to see her progress from a naive girl to a complete kick-ass cyborg. Dr. Ito was also a great, endearing father figure, and Hugo was a pretty decent love interest for Alita. Like I said earlier, there is some cheesy dialogue between the two of them, but overall, I buy their relationship. It feels organic, and I dig it. Now for the villains. How do I put this? The villains of this movie suck ass. They're very corny stereotypes that we've seen in every action movie ever. So yeah, most of the characters in this movie are kinda just there, they're nothing special, but the three standouts are Alita, Dr. Ito, and Hugo, but especially Alita. She makes the movie 1,000 times more fun. Visuals. This movie, kinda like Aquaman did, had me conflicted in how I felt about the visuals. At some times, I loved it, and at other times, it didn't look the best. So when I first talked about this movie with my friends on the podcast, I asked the question, why did they have to make Alita fully CGI? Why couldn't they have saved a dickload of money and just use the actress, Rosa Salazar, as her normal, non-CGI self? But like every time Alita had like a big grin on her face, it looked kinda creepy. But like I said, personally, I just would have liked to have seen the real actress play Alita instead of just having a CGI version. And I know for a fact some sweaty keyboard warrior will get mad at me for having this opinion, but it's just the way I feel. Sue me. I also just would have liked to have seen some of the actors in more practical armored suits. It would have saved the producers a ton of money, and I think it would have looked pretty cool. I mean, CGI is an awesome technology, but does it really need to be used this much? For the city and some of the fight scenes, sure, but I think it could have been dialed back in some areas. In some scenes where there was no action and Alita was just hanging out and talking, I thought the CGI looked fine. But when she was with a bunch of people in a crowd in the city, you could easily tell that she wasn't real. I just think it looked kind of jarring to see a fully CGI character walking around among other real actors. And during some of the fight scenes, the CGI looked a bit rubbery, just a little bit. But the landscape and city looked pretty great though. The cinematography was pretty solid, and I thought the landscape again was just very impressive and very visually pleasing. Action. The action in this movie kicked ass, and it's an action movie, so that's kind of what you're hoping for, right? Despite most of the action scenes being totally CGI, I could still tell what was happening. It wasn't some Transformers robot fuckfest where I couldn't tell who was what and what was happening. I could clearly tell what was going on in the action scenes, and it was a lot of fun. My favorite action scene was definitely the brawl at the bar, and I think one of the reasons I liked it so much was that it wasn't a super over-the-top action scene, but it was still intense enough to get the blood pumping. In closing, so is Alita Battle Angel a movie you must see in theaters? Maybe. I'm torn. If you're tight on a budget and can't afford to go to the movies very often, then I would maybe wait until this movie is on Netflix or available to rent. However, if you want to see a fun movie with your friends and watch a badass female cyborg kick the shit out of some bad guys, then by all means, throw your money at it. This isn't some groundbreaking film by any means, but it's definitely a good time. I will definitely say the thing I probably hated the most about this movie was the ending. And again, I'm not going to get into spoilers, so if you want to know more about how I feel, then leave a comment, but I just thought the way they handled a certain someone was a bit disappointing. And the very end of this movie clearly set it up for a sequel. And I know some people may not mind that, but it kind of bothered me just a little bit. I had several unanswered questions by the end of this movie, and I guess that's fine that they didn't answer all of them. I'm sure they'll be answered in a sequel if there is one, but I don't know. It just seems like they were building to this big confrontation to the main villain of the movie, who is this dude named Nova, but I was kind of bummed out with how they handled that confrontation by the end. So there is a bit of a cliffhanger ending to get you hyped for a second movie, and I'm not gonna lie, I would probably watch a second one. Now, would I pay to see that movie in theaters? Maybe. But I definitely want more answers about Alita's past and the history of Iron City and Salem. If they plan to make this a trilogy or whatever, then I can totally understand why they wanted to leave some stuff unanswered to answer later in future films. But I guess I'm just an impatient dickhead. Overall, I'd give Alita Battle Angel a solid 6.5 out of 10. It's an above average action film with great fight scenes and a lovable protagonist, but the story itself is pretty predictable with some shitty villains and cheesy dialogue. And with that being said, thank you guys for watching, and be sure to let me know your thoughts on Alita Battle Angel in the comments. Did you guys like the movie? Did you hate the movie? Are you gonna see it in theaters? Just let me know what you think. I'm really curious to talk to you guys and see what your opinions are on the movie. Thanks again for watching. Leave a like if you guys enjoyed the video, and I'll talk to you guys later. Here with you now.